Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the New York State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. With us is noted commentator, essayist, and attorney Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Gentlemen, so I'm looking at the television last Friday, and I see there's a public performance by the President of the United States, Donald Trump, the Vice President of the United States, Mr. Vance, Zelensky, who's the President of the Ukraine. And I have to tell you something, I was very unhappy to watch that discussion. Let me begin by saying, what was that all about? The way I was taught to do negotiations is you do it behind closed doors, you do it quietly and nicely. If you have to get a little agitated and raise your voice, you especially do it behind closed doors. You don't go out and do a public performance until you're ready to have all smiles, shake your hands, and move on to congratulate each other on a great negotiation and a victory for each side. That's the way I was taught. The Harvard Business School has a whole course in negotiations, and you don't have to go to Harvard to know that's the common sense way to do that. What we saw unfolding before our very eyes was an awful situation. I don't think Trump conducted himself appropriately. I don't think Vance conducted himself appropriately. And by the way, I don't think Zelensky conducted himself appropriately. So what was it all about? Has to do with some mineral deal. And the thesis underlying Trump and Vance's approach is that somehow if you get a mineral deal and you put that into effect in the Ukraine, then that will cause Putin not to attack again, and that will have some sort of security guarantee. I'm very skeptical about that, especially dealing with Putin and his record of breaching agreements and taking the West for a ride because of the West's naivete. I don't believe that was a good way to do it. I don't think as a matter of style it worked, and I think as a guarantee of security, I don't blame Zelensky for being troubled because his country's fighting an existential fight against a Russian bear which wants to reestablish the Soviet empire. So I thought that was not good for Trump. I thought that was not good for a fair peace deal, and I think it hurt the president and the vice president, both in foreign affairs and domestically. Now, it may have, a week later, been successful in bullying Mr. Zelensky into making the deal, because Zelensky himself, and it might have been a language problem or a style problem, he didn't seem to read the room. And very smart people keep saying he didn't read the room properly. That could be a cultural thing. That could be a language thing. But the point is, Trump knows how to read a room. When he saw it was going south, he should have said, why don't we conduct this, have a conversation in private? Let me buy you a cup of coffee. Let's go to lunch. And they could have stopped it right then and there. So that's my view of that. Now, do I want to see peace? Of course. Am I a hero with other people's lives? No. But do I think you reward aggression? Saying that a minor incursion, like the idiot President of the United States, Biden, said, a minor incursion would be okay, thereby inviting Putin to invade Ukraine. They had red lines, and Obama allowed other pieces of the Ukraine to be gobbled up. The Ukraine has an absolute right to have its territory protected. Now, it may be too late to cut a deal giving territory back, or all of the territory back to the Ukraine, but some of it can get back. And I think Trump will try to get peace, and I'll think he's going to try to get a fair deal. I wish the hell, however, he hadn't done that demonstration. I was very troubled by that. So, Eric, I want to get your thoughts, and then we'll get Jesse's thoughts, then we'll turn over to the Trump's address to the joint session of Congress.
Well, to say it wasn't well choreographed, I guess, is truly an understatement.
You don't think I'm good at understatement?
I thought, you're a pretty good understater. Pretty good understater.
Okay, thank you.
In any event, this will all come out shake out one way or another in the end. If there's a deal that where the United States gets reimbursed for its billions of dollars of investment, billions of dollars of sending weapons to Ukraine. There are security guarantees for Ukraine, and we can peel Russia away from China. And there's peace, and Russia is persuaded not to invade again, then all will be forgiven. It remains to be seen whether or not that can be accomplished. I have always said, and I've said it repeatedly on this show, to me the real open question is, what are the security guarantees? I'm not persuaded that a mineral deal and an American investment in Ukraine is sufficient to guarantee the security of Ukraine, because we always have to worry that, first of all, it would be helpful if we all acknowledged some existing facts. Putin's a thug. Putin invaded Ukraine. Putin started the war. Putin's a bad guy. And Ukraine has been fighting for its existence. And if we can start from those facts, I think it's a lot easier for people to accept, different strategies on how to achieve goals. It's when Donald Trump doesn't admit these facts that makes people like me scratch our heads, what exactly we're dealing with. But again, if we end up with the good result, I think most of this will be forgiven. You talk about whether or not, Richard, Ukraine will have to give back some territory. That was a legitimate question at the very beginning when the Soviets, or the Russians, first invaded Ukraine. Had Joe Biden handled this differently? But the die was cast almost immediately when Joe Biden was always a day late and a dollar short in providing Ukraine with the weapons that they needed. Because they adopted the strategy, and again, we've discussed this repeatedly. They've done it to Israel, and they're doing it in spades to Ukraine. It's okay. We want you to not lose, but by the same token, we don't want you to win. So basically, we're saying you are destined to a stalemate. And once you're destined to a stalemate, there's no regaining the territory you've lost. So they're going to have to be territorial concessions by the Ukrainians. So in a certain respect, the Trump strategy and the Biden strategy at this point, or the Biden strategy, the Trump strategy at this point, are identical. Hopefully we can reach a peace. The Ukrainians are going to have to make territorial concessions. And then we get down to security guarantees. And as also we've discussed on the show before, in 1994, Ukraine was the third largest nuclear power on the planet. They agreed to give up those nuclear weapons in exchange for a guarantee of their territorial integrity by the UK and the United States. Biden failed miserably at that. And then there's the question of what impact this has on NATO. And so who's going to take the lead in the security guarantees? The Russians have said they will not accept NATO troops in Ukraine. The United States, correctly in my view, have said we will not commit American troops to Ukraine. And Russia has also said they will not accept them. The French and the British have said they'd be willing to commit troops. I have not heard. I don't know if the Russians have objected to that, but the French and the British have also admitted that will not be sufficient without an American backstop. And I don't know that Trump's going to be willing to give that American backstop. So the question is going to come back to whether or not there's the appropriate security guarantees. Now, on the good news side, I think over the last couple of days, Zelensky has relented. I think has retracted some of his statements, or has given a quasi-apology, and has stated unequivocally he's ready to sign the mineral deal. So that should give Trump an off-ramp to be able to say, okay, great, I've got a victory, we're signing the mineral deal, and these negotiations are back on track. Okay, great. I'm all for that. We're all for peace. But it can't be peace at any price. I mean, on December 7th, 1941, I could have ended World War II. Surrender. Japanese attack, we surrender. There's no World War II. But so it's not just a matter of ending a war or stopping war. It's the terms and the conditions under which the war is stopped. And I remain hopeful that Donald Trump can be successful, and I wish him well, that he can succeed. But time will tell, and history will write the story.
Jesse, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think that I just want to point out, I think that the Trump administration has classified Russia as the aggressor. They've done their talking points and all that stuff as we move forward. And also, and it comes to a mineral deal, Judge, you said you had a concern that, Russia would back out of it because Putin's got a deal of getting out of every deal. The thing is, the rare earth mineral deal is between the Ukraine and the United States. Now, we can debate what type of security force would mean or what a deal with a United States presence in Ukraine on an economic package. We could debate that. But the thing, let's not forget a couple of things here. Number one, it wasn't a good look. And I do think that Zelensky, whether it be language or just the way he has been trying to negotiate this, I think, and I believe, and I saw the entire demonstration on Friday, it was almost as he was trying to add conditions to the deal in public when you should have done that at lunch, have a cup of coffee before you have the press conference following the Oval Office press avail.
Well, we just got a great call from one of our good friends, Senator Tim Sheehy of the great state of Montana, a good friend of Eric and of mine. We know the senator very, very well. Senator, it's an honor and privilege to have you on Let the Record Show. Thank you for coming off the Senate floor to be on the show with us. To our audience, I just want to say that Tim Sheehy is an American hero, won the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, served in Afghanistan, graduate of the Naval Academy, successful businessman, newly elected to the United States Senate. So, Senator, welcome to Let the Record Show. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Richard and Eric, and thanks for what you're doing, spreading the good word up in New York, because the time to save America is now, and we're working hard to do it every day. Thanks for your support.
Well, we're happy to do that. We're going to have Eric talk to you for a while, then Chairman Garcia will talk to you for a while. Eric.
Well, Senator, welcome to the show. I'm proud to say I was an early and strong supporter of yours going back to the early days of your campaign, and I'm delighted that you are now a sitting senator in the United States Senate. So I guess the first question I have for you is, how you finding the Senate? Is it everything you expected it to be? More, less, about the same?
Well, clearly, we're aligned with an administration that's doing historic things right now. And I don't know what the Senate looks like when we're not in the majority and with a friendly White House. But from what I hear from my colleagues, it's quite a bit less fun when you're trying to slow down bad things than help good things happen. So it's been an exciting first few weeks. And, of course, what the president and his team are doing is historic. I mean, I think we're going to look back on these just few weeks already, and we're not even close to being done. And I think it's going to be some of the most consequential actions taken in the history of our country. And of course, an issue I know is near and dear to your heart, Eric, is Israel, as is mine. It's the first thing I did after I was elected was I got on a plane and went to Israel. I'd been there before as part of my military and business years, but it was important for me to get an update of what's going on the ground there. And as you know, the actions of the president and his team have led to a swift shift in the balance of power there. And of course, bringing the hostages home is his number one priority, and we're seeing that happen as we speak.
Yeah, no, I want to thank you for your support for the American-Israeli relationship. That's very critical. What a lot of our listeners may not know is, some of your deployments were in Iraq and Afghanistan, and you brought some souvenirs home with you. I think one of them is still in your leg. It's shrapnel from an Iranian IED, but there's some. So you have a very strong connection to the Iranian regime. And on that note, what do you think should be the next steps the United States should be taking and Israel should be taking vis-a-vis your good friends, the Iranians?
Well, maximum pressure on Iran all the time. There's no question that Iran has been one of our most ardent and aggressive adversaries for 43 years. They've been systematically murdering and killing Americans, and of course, Israelis, and through proxy groups as well as themselves. They've been one of our most aggressive adversaries. And the fact that we have seen successive Democrat administrations literally handing them cash, pallets of cash, billions of dollars, to take that money, hand it to proxy groups or to their own IRGC, and then use that money to kill Americans and to kill Israelis is absolutely disgusting, and it's shameful. And it's about time what we're seeing from the President Trump's administration, and of course, but from the rest of the government as well, is a renewed maximum pressure campaign to ensure that we're treating Iran the way they should be treated, which is as a terrorist state. I don't even call them a state sponsor of terror, because that implies that you have some sort of passive government that just lets terror happen. They're not a state sponsor of terror. They are a terrorist regime, and they've done everything they can to wipe off will wipe Israel off the map, and of course every chance they've gotten to destroy free Western values. So maximum pressure from Iran with regard to economic policy and military policy as well. And we've seen in the Red Sea just recently here, this isn't a regional issue. Shipping to the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, the Straits of Hormuz, those have global implications for everyone on the planet, to include Americans right here in the heartland. And we need to make sure we're dealing with this regime as aggressively as possible.
Senator, I just want to raise one question with you. There's just a report that came out from the Senate Judiciary Committee, which said that there was evidence that the Obama-Kerry regime actually tried to suppress investigations about espionage here in the United States by Iranian officials. What are your thoughts about that?
There's no doubt in my mind that's true. I mean, I think we all kind of accepted that as a matter of principle, but by simply seeing, how the Obama and Biden administrations functioned with regard to Iran, that there was a very clear sympathy towards the Shia extremist movement and towards the Iranian state. And, some say this goes back to, decades ago with the, kind of the anti-colonial movement, the occupier, occupee, whole construct that we're seeing as Marxist DEI CRT type education system where, they want to delegitimize any sort of Western form of government that's perceived as colonial. And I think for some of them, they see the Ayatollah's regime as the Iranian people seizing their fate again. So in some crazy, weird prism of logic, they're the good guys. And I don't know whether that's how they get there or not, but there's no question that we've seen aiding and abetting of the Iranian regime to, in my opinion, a criminal degree. It's led to dead Americans, dead Israelis, and we need to find out whoever in those administrations was perpetuating those policies and helping the regime and bring them to account. No question.
No, we could talk about Iran forever, and of course, you and I have spoken about our good buddy Robert Malley, who apparently was instrumental in perhaps leaking some intelligence from his phone to the Iranians. But we could talk about that. But I want to just change the topic for a second. Because in addition to your being a war hero, you also have a history of being an entrepreneur. And one of the businesses you've been involved with has included being a firefighting missions across the United States for fighting wildfires. And I know you've been instrumental in sponsoring nearly 10 bipartisan bills aimed at overhauling the federal response to wildfires, in response to the recent events in LA and in the Carolinas. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience fighting fires and, what's contained in these pieces of legislation and why you think they're so important? Well,
I mean, wildfires are a core part of life for a lot of us in the Western U.S. And I think as much of New York saw a couple of years ago when Canada was burning, this is an East Coast issue too. And actually, I just got off the Senate floor with Andy Kim of New Jersey, who, although we may not align on a lot of things ideologically, he dealt with some serious fires in New Jersey last fall and recognized that there wasn't a response apparatus in place to appropriately protect his communities. And we decided to partner on a bill to try to address that. And all of the rest of America saw how devastating these wildfires can be. And it's not just that they kill hundreds of people and burn thousands of homes. It's that has a direct inflationary impact because the cost of everything will go up. The cost of homeowners insurance in some cases will go up 100 times based on wildfire risk for people in Western America. And some people won't be able to get homeowners insurance. And if that makes 10 to 20% of the homes in the country illiquid, or homeowners insurance climbs by that much, that's not solely cordoned off to wildfire areas. That has an impact on the rest of the insurance market. That means everybody's insurance goes up. That means everyone's interest rates will go up. So, in a period of time where we're trying to bring interest rates down, bring inflation down, when we have to spend $250 billion, $250 billion, the most expensive disaster in American history, we now have to take unbudgeted cash and shove it out to California to help them recover. Once again, we're printing money. So we can't afford these kind of episodes of government incompetence anymore. We're seeing that, that's the theme right now. And wildfire is it's low-hanging fruit. It's something we can easily address. We can do a much better job to protect our communities. And how I got into wildfire was seeing the close air support model and capabilities we had in Iraq and Afghanistan to support my SEAL teams on the ground. I recognized that our firefighters in America didn't have close to that type of technology helping them. So I started my companies to try to close that gap. And luckily we were very successful in that regard. It created hundreds of jobs, and now I'm trying to bring that same mindset here to fix this problem on a national level.
I'd like to turn this over to Chairman Garcia. Jesse, the Senator is all yours.
Senator, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you. And it's truly, I want to thank you for your service, not only just in the Navy, but to us as Americans just recently by flipping a state that was held by a Democrat for 3 terms and finally bring some common sense to that office. I see you're a naval veteran and a Navy SEAL that served in Iraq, Afghanistan, South America. I need to ask you a question. Did that properly prepare you for the battles that you're facing in the states in the U.S. Senate with Chuck Schumer? Because the guy's a bit of a jerk, and we could probably use some SEAL veteran help here in New York when he has those stupid Sunday press conferences.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more on that front. But listen, I think military experience, can help with anything in life. And one of the exciting alliances I think we see coming out in this new Congress is, in the wake of GWAT, we're seeing a lot of young veterans come out and get involved in government. In fact, just this morning I had a great meeting with Seth Moulton from Massachusetts, who, although he's a Democrat, he's a common sense Democrat, former Marine officer, and also veteran of the Iraq War. And those of us who served together, one of the greatest stories in the U.S. Senate was that of, Bob Dole and Daniel Inouye, who were both World War II veterans. They were both wounded together in the same battle, and they were shared hospital beds next to each other for several months in the hospital and became best friends. And although they were on the other sides of the aisle, they were able to work together at key times in American history to craft bipartisan legislation. So I think that same mindset can come to you from the military, where there's a time to fight and there's a time to stand for values. And we can always compromise, and we can compromise on policy, but we don't have to compromise on our values. And things like Israel, things like, bringing the hostages home, defending, the state of Israel, that's not a policy decision that we can compromise on, because that is a fundamental values decision. Keeping boys out of women's sports, that's a fundamental values decision. Tax policy. We want lower taxes, but guess what? That's going to require negotiation and compromise to get to a point where we can pass those kinds of policies. So I think that mindset does help, having been in the military, because you understand what are the things you can accept and compromise on, what are the things you cannot compromise on. And it's very important you figure out what those are and you hold to it.
Yeah, you also spoke a lot about reforms, and you said the issues you spoke about just now. And one that maybe is not getting a lot of attention to because of everything going on at the border and the reconciliation bill and so on and so forth is education. How do you see reforming education to put more monies and more resources into the classroom as opposed to administrations and the crazy policies and curriculums that the Department of Education was instilling in our states and our school systems over the last 12 out of the last 16 years?
Nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it say it's the federal government's responsibility to educate or indoctrinate our children. The Department of Education served a very specific role at a very specific time, which was, the desegregation of schools and ensuring equal access to education. Obviously, it's a runaway train, as much of our federal government has become. And now we're spending billions of dollars in a department that, frankly, isn't worried about education at all. It's worried about printing student loans. It's worried about spreading ideology that parents don't agree with. And I'm of the opinion the Department of Education should go away. There are roles that it fills that can be much more effectively filled by the states, filled by counties, filled by cities. All the money we spend on the bloated federal bureaucracy should be getting piped directly through to state governments, to local governments. And frankly, no one's ever going to take as much care in educating or raising your children as parents are. Parents need to be in the driver's seat of the kids' education. When we see parents being criminalized or being called domestic terrorists for expressing concern over what their children are being taught, that's one of those values decisions that you can't compromise on. So we need to put education back in the hands of the families. That's the way it was for centuries and millennia before we invented this industrialized education model where we farmed out the raising of our children to the state. There is a role for the government to play, but that should be local government, where parents and families have input into what their children are being taught. And at the end of the day, the educators are accountable to the parents for what they're teaching their kids. So, I think it's time. We're seeing a disruptive pattern emerge here where the government is willing to make drastic changes to make our government more accountable and responsive to the people. And education is going to be part of that.
So one of the unfortunate facts of life in education in the United States is that there's a tremendous amount of foreign money that is poured not just into our colleges and universities, but into our K through 12. Qatar is a perfect example of that. There are, where I live up in Westchester County in Newcastle, the Chappaqua School District has a Middle East curriculum that is funded by Qatar and is done in coordination with Brown University, and is taught to our students as to what Middle East history is. And needless to say, it doesn't portray the Israelis in the best light. What, if anything, can the federal government do to put a halt to foreign governments influencing what is being taught to our children?
It's no different than things we have such as CFIUS, where we have processes where we can detect foreign influence in our country and fight it. And you're exactly right, Eric. When we have foreign governments writing billions of dollars of checks to our schools to shape that education, we need to stop that. And we need to make sure that they are not being given undue influence to shape our education process and mold our curriculum to, as you see, our college campuses. We have college kids in America, and I'd love to know, Eric, how many of those kids are on federally backed student loans, by the way, who are out there protesting the state of Israel, calling for death to the Jews, protesting in favor of Hamas, which is a disgusting, murderous organization. And those people, a lot of that base anti-Semitism is a result of, there's no question about it, foreign influence in our education system. So, we can pass legislation, as we saw, just last year in those fantastic congressional hearings where, the heads of those colleges were asked a very simple question, and they couldn't even answer it with simple moral clarity, the fact that Jews had the right to exist on this planet, for Christ's sake. So we need to fight that tooth and nail. That'll require legislation, and we'll be trying to get that done.
Well, Senator, I want to thank you very much for being on Let the Record Show. On behalf of Chairman Garcia, Eric Levine, and myself, it's an honor and privilege to have you on the show. We look forward to having you back. We wish you every good wish in your Senate career. And I know for the three of us, we're absolutely delighted to have somebody of your quality, ability, and experience sitting in the United States Senate protecting the American people. Thanks again, Senator, for being with us on Let the Record Show.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
This episode is brought to you by GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco. Get the most out of your vehicle with GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco original equipment. The only parts designed, engineered, tested, and backed by General Motors. You can find your perfect fit for most makes and models and choose from 3 tiers of parts, including GM OE or gold and silver aftermarket parts. Visit gmparts.com for more information.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
When your company earns unlimited 2% cash back on all purchases with Capital One, that's serious business. So Stephen at SandCloud got a serious business card, the Spark Cash Plus card from Capital One.
We used our 2% cash back to help build our retail presence.
Savvy, Stephen.
And we get big purchasing power, so our business can spend more and earn more.
The Spark Cash Plus card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms and conditions apply. Find out more at CapitalOne.com/SparkCashPlus.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. For our listeners, as you note, Chairman Garcia was holding forth on the Trump-Vance-Zelensky meeting. And then we got this call from Senator Tim Sheehy of the state of Montana, a great United States senator, a military hero, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, graduate of the Naval Academy. We had this great conversation with Jesse and Eric and myself with the senator. I hope our listeners enjoyed it. But I want to get back to you, Jesse. We were talking about this Trump-Vance-Zelensky meeting. you had a few more thoughts on that before we jump over to Trump's address before Congress.
Yeah, things that we shouldn't forget about this is, as before that Oval Office appearance even took place, 2 previous times Zelensky delayed the signing of that mineral deal. He tried to, and I do believe he tried to negotiate that in public, and it failed miserably for him. And let's not forget also that he was briefed by at least 12 plus senators and Secretary of State Marco Rubio about a 3-step process here. Now, we can debate whether or not a rare earth mineral deal and the U.S. presence there with an economic package and access is a security buffer. I don't believe it was ever intended to be the security backstop. It was part of it. But Zelensky was told it's a 3-step process. You signed a rare earth mineral deal. We enter into a ceasefire. And then all the questions that you and Eric were discussing about territory, about trusting Putin at the tables. Number one, we will identify at that point, we will be able to show the world again that Putin really doesn't want peace. Or maybe is it that Zelensky doesn't want peace? I do know that while maybe it's not the best way to have these negotiations go forward in public, it should have been done at the luncheon table after that avail, but it happened. And the result is, and both of you pointed it out, that the result is what Trump was getting and wanted to do. At the joint address of Congress, he spoke very clearly about a letter he received from President Zelensky with a more conciliatory tone, and he wants to move forward with the rare earth mineral deals and also move forward towards peace. Now, let's not forget, in between those periods of times, the Friday debacle in the Oval Office and the joint address in Congress, Zelensky himself said, and I believe he should have be condemned for this, that he said peace is very, very, very far away. For me, that almost sounds like Putin, who doesn't want peace either. If that's the case, then these both individuals don't want peace in that resort. At the very least, the Trump administration, is trying to bring these two forces to the table so that a peace can finally be discussed and reached that will hold.
Eric, any comments on that before we get to the state? I keep going to State of the Union address, but it wasn't formally a State of the Union address. It was just a
joint session.
It was a joint session of Congress.
His first year of his administration. No, I think we've exhausted the Ukraine.
So let's switch.
I know I'm exhausted.
Okay, we're all exhausted, but we have enough energy to talk about Trump's address to the joint session of Congress. So let me give you my thoughts on that. First of all, in the old days, they used to call these grandiose speeches stem winders. You know, these people go on and on and on and on, and that's exactly what Trump did. He was on for 1 hour and 39 minutes, which sets the record in modern times for an address by a president before Congress. These are my thoughts. He had a lot of good things to say. I think he conducted himself in a presidential manner. I was very impressed by him doing that. I think he made a number of promises that are going to be tough to fulfill both domestically and in terms of foreign policy. But I think he controlled that room. I think the Democrats, my party, disgraced themselves the way they conduct themselves. They had those little placards in front of them. You know, I thought I was at an auction for used cars, the way these Democrats were carrying on. You had Al Green, this clown from Texas, had to be forcibly removed from the chambers where he was harassing the President of the United States. Totally disrespectful. You had a 13-year-old kid who's suffering from terminal brain cancer, was honored and received by the president. He was made an honorary Secret Service agent. You had the children and the widows of people who have fallen either at the terrorist attack and assassination attack in Butler, Pennsylvania, against President Trump during the campaign. You have cops who were injured and killed. The Democrats sat on their hands. They couldn't even applaud in moments when their basic humanity called out for a show of unity, a show of compassion, a show of humanity. I thought they were disgraceful. And I think it will come back to haunt them. And I understand that Mr. Green has now been censured by the by the Congress of the United States?
Appropriately so. I mean, his conduct was outrageous.
Absolutely.
So, Jesse, being the most politically astute person on this conversation, what are your thoughts when you were listening to this address by the President of the United States?
Well, if I'm the most politically astute from this conversation, we need to get another conversation.
It's a very low bar, Jesse. It's a very low bar.
Yeah.
That's right.
More important than what I think. Let's talk about what the American people thought. CBS did an overnight poll on those who watched the joint session of Congress, which was north of about 40 million. 76% of the people approved of his address. What's even more important to me, even though the number is a little bit lower, but over that magic 60% number that we always look at in campaigns, 63% agreed with the issues that the president spoke of. And I have to tell you, what we heard that night was President Trump continuing to fulfill promises he made to the American people. And he's been taking on those radical policies that have weakened our nation. You know, I think that the Democrats embarrass themselves. They embarrass their cause, and they have shined a light that they are devoid of issues, devoid of solutions, devoid of ideas. They are nothing more than a band of individuals that seek protest through singing, through dancing, and through raising placards. It was a sad night for the Democrat Party. But I will tell you, that night, the American people saw a president who is charting a new course for America and one that promises great rewards. That's just from a political point of view. But more importantly, the fact that the overnight snap poll from the people who watched the address had given it strong numbers to like 76% of approval. And of course, that the president, as you said, speaking and being presidential, being direct, being decisive, being clear, and also charting a course on issues important to Americans, people who need issues that are dealing with on an everyday basis. And he was striking that chord with them. And appropriately so, taking a victory lap for the successes he has had in the first 6 weeks.
Well, Eric, I only have a couple of minutes left. I'll give you the final word before we sign off.
Yes, I thought what was most interesting was the Democrat response. Because typically, or recently, the Democrats have always been able to sing off the same sheet of music. What was interesting in watching, the one thing they could agree on is that they hate Donald Trump. And I think the one thing they could agree on is that given the choice between America succeeding and Donald Trump succeeding versus America failing and Donald Trump failing, they certainly give the impression that they're more interested in the country failing and Donald Trump failing. But what was interesting is that they protested in a number of different ways. Typically, when Nancy Pelosi was in charge, they only protested or did something in one way, the way Nancy Pelosi said they'll do it. But you had a group of members of Congress who didn't show up. That was one form of protest. Some who showed up in pink, some who showed up in white. That was another form of protest. Some who showed up with placards, some didn't have placards. Some placards said some things, and some placards said different things. Some people stood up when he walked in. Some people didn't stand up. Some people occasionally applauded. Some people never applauded at all. But there was no unanimity amongst the Democrats on how to respond to Trump, and that is a danger sign for the Democrats, because it's one thing to be in the opposition, but it's another thing to be in the opposition and to be in complete disarray, and that's where they apparently appear to be. They are a party not just in a minority, but a party in the minority in disarray and not knowing a way forward. And unless and until they can come up with a message beyond we want, trans girls in, who are biological men and women's sports, until they come up with a message beyond that, which is basically the message of the governor of Maine, they're going to remain in the wilderness, and they're going to remain they're going to be reigned without any sort of cohesive message. You can only win when you have a message. You can only win when you say, this is what we want for the country. I have no idea what the Democrats want, other than they keep fighting and resorting back to the woke diversity, equity, inclusion agenda and the climate agenda, which has failed them miserably, that the majority of the Americans have clearly voted against. And it's going to be interesting to watch the Democratic Party as it moves forward, because unless and until it can change its message and make it a popular message and a coherent message, they're going nowhere.
I agree with that.
This is Let the Record Show. This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We're back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Suffolk County Party. With us is noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. You know, politics is a tough sport. It's not for sissies, as Senator Dole used to say.
Not beanbag, as Bill Clinton would say.
Right. And the fact of the matter is, I know it's tough, but there also should be some sort of moral compass, some sort of intellectual moral integrity. And I want to talk about my party, the Democratic Party, which seems to have lost its intellectual and its moral compass. So let's talk about what the New York State Democrats are doing, playing games with fair elections. So, for example, they want to have in New York City, they passed a law, which is now being challenged in the courts, and it's in the Court of Appeals in New York State, allowing in municipal elections non-citizens voting. So in New York law, if you're here for 30 days, after you got off the banana boat, you could vote in elections here in New York City and decide how public money is to be spent, how public safety is to be conducted, how zoning is to be done. I mean, the whole thing was ridiculous. But the Democrats pushed that through. It's challenged in the courts so far, in both the state Supreme Court and the appellate division. The people challenging that ridiculous proposition, even though the Constitution of the state of New York is very clear, only citizens can vote. So far, the challenges to that piece of legislation are winning. Hopefully, the New York Court of Appeals will do the right thing. Though I have to admit I'm a little bit skeptical, since the radical Democrats who control the state Senate have tried to populate the New York Court of Appeals with friendly voices. So much for an independent judiciary. Now, the other thing they've done is they're trying, and Jesse is an expert on this, being a county chair out in Suffolk County, they've tried to make elections for local offices, town boards, town councils, county executives, county legislatures, all the elected officials in the local elections. They're trying to do that in even number of years. Why? They're doing that because they think they get a bigger vote in the even number of years from more registered Democrats than Republicans. That's what that's about. And then another gambit they have, you have a nominee, a member of Congress, Stefanik from upstate New York, and she's Trump's nominee to be the UN ambassador. And what do you have with that? What you have with that is you have the threat that they're going to delay that, so there'll be one less vote for the Republican majority in the United States House of Representatives. It's an awful game that they're playing. So Stefanik still stays in the House, and she hasn't taken over responsibilities at the United Nations as the ambassador of the United Nations. So, Jesse, I want to get your thoughts on those issues and where you see this going.
What I see is that this just has one common denominator behind it. And that is because the Democrats realize that their failed policies are hurting the middle class. They're hurting the electorate. These are policies that are draining municipal budgets like sanctuary cities and taxing their citizens to fund these things. Their policies are making everyone less safe in their streets. Their stores are either closing or locking up their goods or locking their doors, and you have to be buzzed in like you're in, somewhere in Mexico. And the fact of the matter is they're looking for a new voting pool, a new pool that they think that they can exploit so that they can maintain their position of power and authority, because they're losing everyone that has any type of common sense. This is nothing. These laws, moving local elections to even years so they can drown out or try to drown out, local issues like the, potholes, the restoration of beaches, environmental concerns and stuff. None of that's going to be helped, because at the root of all of the Democrats' problems, especially here in New York and in Suffolk County and in Nassau County, is that their policies are failing average middle-class New Yorkers. And we are seeing through that. The public is seeing through that. The electorate has seen through it. And they're voting with that way at the voting booth. They can continue to make their shenanigans. I have a lot of hope that the Court of Appeals will uphold the lower two courts' decisions on non-citizen voting in New York City? Because my big fear is that once New York City does this, those crazy zealots in Albany are going to try and impose that in every other county here in Suffolk County. I mean, in the state of New York.
No, I think that's right. And before I turn this over to Eric, my thought is this is just a device to have one-party dominance in the state of New York. And how is that working out? Eric?
Well, the problem is there already is one-party dominance in the state.
But this only reinforces it.
It does reinforce it, and unfortunately, that's part of the reason why New York is in a death spiral. And the only way we're going to turn this around is if we're able to revitalize a Republican Party. Currently, the Republican Party in the state of New York, we have some bright spots: Suffolk County, Long Island, Jesse, but statewide, it's not a pretty picture. And that's really a problem. And unfortunately, it really appears if we're really going to have a true two-party state, it's going to have to be from the top down and not from the bottom up. I think we're going to have to defeat Governor Hochul. Hopefully somebody like Mike Lawler will step into the breach and be able to win. Everybody has seen what Kathy Hochul is. She's an utter failure and a complete incompetent. Unfortunately, Lee Zeldin was close, but just couldn't quite do it. But people have now gotten a clearer picture of who Hochul is. And unless and until I think we're going to get a Republican governor, it's going to be very difficult to change the dynamic and the way the state functions. It's kind of like trying to turn around an aircraft carrier that's out at sea at full speed. It can be done, but it takes a long time, and it's very hard to turn around. And Jesse, you would know this far better than I, but I happen to think that the only way to do that in the state right now is a top-down Republican taking the governorship and let the governor kind of revamp and reshape the state and reshape the party. I'd be curious to your view on that.
Well, obviously, the governor, a Republican governor, would absolutely do that. We're seeing that right now at the federal level with a Republican president, Donald Trump. But, right now what we're also seeing, and the people of New York are feeling it every day of their life, whether it be in their pocketbooks, in their security at home, or whatnot, is the great loss of the Republican-led Senate in the 2018 midterm elections.
In the New York State Senate.
In the New York, I'm sorry. Did I say? I'm sorry. The New York State Senate.
I just wanted our listeners to know. We're talking about the fact is when they had Republican-controlled state Senate, you put a check on the extreme left-wing, radical socialist, progressive control of the assembly. And when the Democrats got control of the Senate, all kinds of crazy legislation got through.
And the Republican Senate also was a vehicle that allowed and assisted a Republican gubernatorial candidate. Let's not forget, George Pataki was a member of the Senate after having served locally. So it's going to be a two-step approach. This past year in 2024, Republicans statewide broke the supermajority in the state Senate, and we're closer to a majority there. Are we going to get there? I can't really tell you that from my place here in Suffolk County, but I do know myself and Joe Cairo have two Democrat senators that reside in our counties respectively, one each, and we're going to be doing everything possible to flip those seats as we have in the past.
Good work, Jesse. Well, this has been Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted commentator, essayist, and attorney Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. I want to thank you for listening. We look forward to having you back with us next week. God bless you, God bless your families, and God bless America. Thank you for listening.
This is Let the Record Show.